For decades, violence in parts of Rock Island followed a pattern most people didn't recognize until federal prosecutors finally put a name on it. Zone Fifth, also known in court records as Fifth Street Mafia, Arsenal Courts Posse, Rocktown Money Getters, and Money Team, the group wasn't described by the government as a temporary crew or a wave of young offenders. According to federal indictments, it was a long-running criminal enterprise that evolved over years, adapting as members were arrested, incarcerated, or killed. The violence didn't happen all at once. Court filings describe a steady drumbeat: shootings, firearm possession, drug trafficking, retaliation, and intimidation, stretching back to the late 1990s and continuing into the 2020s. Different names, different faces, same territory, same conflicts. According to prosecutors, Zone Fifth operated primarily out of the Arsenal Courts area, using familiarity, fear, and loyalty to maintain control. Members allegedly carried firearms not just for protection, but to enforce rules, settle disputes, and protect drug activity tied to the group. This wasn't random chaos. Federal investigators allege the violence was organized, tied to territory, money, and reputation. Shootings weren't isolated incidents. They were signals, messages to rivals, warnings to anyone who crossed the wrong line. As years passed, law enforcement began connecting cases that once seemed unrelated. Ballistics matched across scenes. Phone records overlapped. Names kept reappearing, sometimes as suspects, sometimes as victims, sometimes as witnesses who later went silent. By the time the federal government stepped in, this wasn't about a single crime. It was about a pattern. According to the indictment, Zone Fifth functioned as a racketeering enterprise, meaning crimes weren't charged as standalone acts, but as part of an ongoing organization. Prosecutors alleged the group's activities included drug trafficking, illegal firearms possession, and repeated acts of violence designed to maintain power. The indictment didn't just name individuals, it described a structure: captains, enforcers, associates, roles that shifted as people went to prison but never fully disappeared. Even as members were incarcerated, prosecutors alleged the enterprise continued, fueled by loyalty and replacement. Then the arrests came: federal raids, multi-defendant indictments, RICO charges that carried decades-long sentences. One by one, members and associates were brought into federal court, where prosecutors laid out years of evidence: surveillance, cooperating witnesses, seized weapons, and prior convictions. Sentences followed: 20 years, 27 years, 30 years. Life-altering time for actions prosecutors argued were part of something much bigger than any one defendant. The Zone 5 indictment didn't claim to end violence in Rock Island overnight, but it did something else. It drew a line under decades of bloodshed and said this wasn't coincidence. It was an operation. And this indictment was just the moment the paperwork finally caught up. Follow for part 2, where we break down how federal investigators say Zone Fifth actually operated day to day, who did what, how orders moved, and why RICO was the charge that changed everything.